The Guam LOA contains some carve-outs, additional improvements, and some changes to the Guam operation. I went out to Guam for 18 months and ended up spending 10 years there. So I've become the de facto Guam SME for the negotiating committee. So some of these are hard-fought items for the Guam pilots. We will give you kind of the talking points, but we really, these guys and Garth gave Guam every opportunity for success in this agreement. We didn't get everything they wanted, but hopefully this will be a nice set of perks for them as they move forward. So the foreign base allowance out there has been increased from $3,000 to $3,500 a month. COMAT, this is a big deal for the Guam guys. We get 3,000 pounds of United cargo for free. However, it's not covered for stolen, lost, damaged items. So we have tons of pilots that have shipped things that have gone missing in Honolulu or been damaged, and there's no recourse. So this was high on their priority list. So we now have a reimbursement through the Chief Pilot's Office until United Cargo puts into some insurance ability. This is for compressed lines. We'll talk about compressed lines a little bit later. It's a very successful, highly desired reserve program out in Guam. Part of that is that they're able to take all their work days or all their days off and push them all together. So what this provision says is just any pilot that has more than 6 days of work, so a 7-day reserve will be considered a 6-day reserve. So the benefit there is just for aggressive pickup and stuff like that. In current book, they're treated as a 7-day reserve. Which sort of puts them out of the running for a lot of the trips that they have out there, 5-day island hoppers. They couldn't use silo -1 because they're just stuck in this perpetual 7 days. So this improvement helps bring them into a better standing when it comes to aggressively picking up flying. This was probably the most difficult item that and we ran all the way up to the tippity top of the management structure, as close to Scott Kirby as we can get, to try to get M5D for Guam. And unfortunately, the American deal kind of soured the water a little bit. American has a carve out in their TA, or I guess now their contract, for continuous duty overnights. These trips that we're talking about are island flying that Guam does. They leave late at night, 10 p.m. They fly down to Yap, Palau, Koror, and some of these other outer islands. And they're single duty 2-day trips, but you're only gone for, I will say, 6 or 7 hours. So they're kind of like nap overs in a sense. We were able to increase that value for those trips from 5 hours in the current book to 7 hours and 45 minutes. There used to be what we called the death march out there. It was a 4-leg all night unaugmented trip. We've now got some limitations on that, some more guardrails. So those trips will be limited to 3 legs. And then the other issue that we've had out in Guam, just for those of you that are going to go out there and speak to the pilots so you have a little background, is that 5-hour 2-day trip, it counts as a 2-day trip. So you might have a pilot that's doing all night yaps, and he is really going to the airport 12 days a month, but it looks like he's working 20 days. So they bump up continuously against min-day off. So the company's committed to finding a workaround for those, whether we move the calendar out in Guam or we find another way to solve that problem. So this is just a chit we're putting down, and we all have more time to look at maybe some new technology that will allow that to happen for the Guam pilots. Island hopper reassignment limit. This is kind of tied to overtime pay and just the nature of the operation out there. This allows for a 48-hour reassignment limit versus the current book, which is a basic trip. It just, for the Guam pilots, the current limitation just made it very difficult for them to get these airplanes back. So pilots were waiving. This sort of just aligns with practice. Guam trip mix. We briefed yesterday on Section 5 trip mix. The Guam, if you ever take a look at the bid packet, it's vastly different than our flying here in the mainland. Their crappy flying is in the top 10% of our flying in the bid packet. They do mostly day turns, evening turns, and then an island hopper trip mix. So the trip mix, it didn't seem to mesh. So what we did is we put a marker, and we just said, hey, listen, if flight schedule changes out there dramatically, we want to come revisit. Maybe it does make sense to put Guam in the mainland basket. But for now, we just have a meet and discuss in there in case the trip parameters change. This was an ask for both sides. So the Guam pilots weren't able to participate in PPD training in the mainland because of this provision in the contract. So they ended up sending an instructor from Denver out to Guam, and we got a lot of feedback that the Guam pilots didn't really enjoy kind of being carved out of the process. And what triggered that was that the current book has a limitation on any training beginning before 1 p.m. And the PPD training, because of the Newark pilots, couldn't be done any earlier because they couldn't get them in. So this is just to sort of align with some of the requests that we got from the Guam pilots. This also was a request from our Guam pilots, and this was because the training footprint for a CQ is so big out there. It's 4 days of travel to get back and forth to Denver. The current book, because training pay didn't have enough value in it, it really affected your bid. So the first 2 days were prorated just to allow you to get more flying into the month to get you a good bid. Now that the training pay has been caught up, we've eliminated this section. So now there will be no proration for training days in Guam. Training travel to and from Narita. This is a carve out that exists for the Guam pilots, which allows the 737 to be considered a near lay flat seat. So we've gotten a lot of feedback from the Guam pilots that are going through Honolulu that would rather go through Narita because it's a more comfortable seat in a product from Denver to Narita. So this allows the company to build our designated flights out of TK to Guam by using this. Unfortunately, once they pulled the 777 out of the Narita Guam market, we lost that lay flat seat. So just allows them to build these training shells the way the Guam pilots would prefer to have them. Let's see, this is another big win for the Guam guys that they've been asking for quite a while. So when the Guam guys go to training, they are permitted to use their PS travel 15 days before or after their training event. So if they have a CQ on the 15th of the month, they can use their PS travel to head back to the States so they can go to Costco and Whole Foods and Target and do all those other things they want to do. And then come at them and be comforted that they're not going to get damaged along the way. Hard to believe how much consternation this one caused, but this is a holdover from a previous agreement, but the Guam pilots will now be permitted to use any NG aircraft. The current book says they can only use an 800 sim because we don't have 700 sims, but those are the only two models that they fly out there. This will allow them to use anything but a MAX for a training event. This is we'll say a modification to which allowed the 745 to get across the line. This is definitely a company want. This is a problem we've had in Guam. For those of you who've been out there, it's tough to keep medical care out there, nonetheless keep good medical care out there. That's the reason I'm back here. So AME availability in Guam. So they sort of come and go. So what this allows is that a pilot whose primary resident is Guam, if there are fewer than two, so if there's only one AME in Guam, this allows you to get positive space travel to Manila, Tokyo, or Hawaii to get your FAA medical.
Two listed or two accepting appointments?
Two available.
They have to be available for the month.
Yeah. So if Dr. Hughes takes the summer off and you're down to LOM, you're down to one. So then you can.
Going further, for someone who may be on a special issue, it's a DC special issue, if that person is not qualified, is there some protection for that?
So there's another provision in the Guam LOA, I think it's I-5, that will give you positive space to take care of those special circumstances. Cleanup items. So TDY to and from Guam, we were able to clean up some language there that had caused confusion since dinosaurs roamed the earth, which was, and the language had said for TDYs in Guam. So no one ever really knew whether that meant the Guam pilot TDYing out or the TDY coming in, but we've cleaned that language up. So now all pilots, whether you're going to TDY to Guam or your Guam pilot TDYing to the mainland, all your travel is considered ad pay. So if you are a Guam pilot and you're going to TDY to Newark, That is 32 hours of ad pay for travel. It's 16 hours each way. If you're a Newark pilot and you're going to TDY to Guam, you'll also be entitled to the travel as if it's ad pay. And then I think Phil briefed yesterday, this was a base trade issue that we kind of stumbled upon through our friends in grievance, which was if you got to Guam on a base trade, you could have been in a situation contractually where you didn't trigger a company paid move off the island. We've cleaned that language up. So any pilot, regardless how you got to Guam, if you give them 36 months, you're entitled to a Guam paid move off the island.
Okay, LOA 2301, this is the implementation LOA. This is typically the last thing that is negotiated as part of an agreement. This was negotiated beginning in July once we got an AIP, and these negotiations closed on Wednesday night late with Garth and the EVP of HR, Kate Chibo. So these finished up late Wednesday night. A lot of back and forth on timelines and how we're going to implement this deal. So if you haven't been through one of these before, implementation is the second half of the battle. You get all the things. Now, when do we start to enjoy those things? Yeah.
Real quick, the black line we got 2 days ago.
Does not have an LOA in it.
Well, it's got LOA 2301. Is it any good, or has this been changed radically since it was sent to us 2 days ago? No radical change.
You got it yesterday?
Yesterday, or was it yesterday? LOA, when you sent out the,
You're going to get a new one, Jonathan. So I'll make it really easy. Don't fall in love or hate with the one that you have, the one that you will get before probably you leave today or today. Yeah, the quality of the black line implementation LOA. Yeah, go with that one. It's very, very hard at this point for me to keep track of which version had what in it. I got to purge that and go to what we have now. But you will have good info when you leave, okay? And this is not a 50-page briefing. This is a one slide. It's more talking. So back to it. So there are a number of things in implementation that can be moved up. There are a number of things that can be done manually. There are a number of things, though, that have to be programmed. We talked about these yesterday, the reserve implementation, the new reserve systems, things like that. Those are not items that can be programmed overnight. These are not done in Apple iOS like a Mac system. These are done in a coding language, COBOL. Yeah, it's like there's a finite people on Earth who understand this stuff apparently, and the ones that, well, is there a volunteer? I mean, hey, they could use the help. So all that to say, there's over 300 changes in the UPA from current book. We don't apologize for any of those. When we are told to go and negotiate changes to our UPA, the MEC is very specific, charge the hill and get everything we can. We are not after what, 5+ years of negotiating, we're not after buying the car that's available on the lot at the time. This is like my dad when he finally was able to get a new truck and retired as a mechanic. He wanted the killer truck that he could get. And so it took a little bit to order it. It was worth the wait from the factory. That's what we got. We're not leasing this. This is something that we're after long-term. And so we didn't go after things that could be delivered by December. There would be a fraction of those number of changes if we negotiated what the company could deliver by December. We went for things that are going to affect United pilots for the rest of their careers. That's what we were after. With that in mind, some of these things have a longer delivery table. So the implementation items are prioritized to maximize the benefit to the pilots. This is a very unique contract cycle for those of you who haven't been through a negotiation. I'm not even doing opinion at this point. The number of things that were gets for us versus gives for the company is unlike any other cycle in history. If you've been through one of these before, it's a lot more give and take. And so in implementation in history, you usually tie things to, we get one of our things, then you can turn one of your things on. It was difficult in implementation when out of those 300 items, probably 280 plus were gets for us and very few were gives for them. So like the 95-hour cap, for example, that was definitely a give for them or a get for them. So those are, it's difficult to say, well, we'll have our 299 items before you get your one, that sort of thing. That really does, it's obviously a heist. So what we tried to do is tie things to make sure that the pilots who were most affected had some sort of restitution or payment until they got their items. So reserve items, for example, you see these reserve package items delayed until August. We went to work in the implementation LOA to find some added benefit for the pilots that are on reserve to make sure that each month that they are, for example, not capped on short call, that they are compensated in some way, shape, or form for those additional short calls. Some other things that we look to do, and you'll see this in the LOA, some items could not be fully deployed until August. For example, the additional day off. Initially, the company said, we can't get the reserve the additional day off until August. Well, that's not super helpful. So we dug in a little bit more and said, what do you mean you can't program an additional day off for reserve? So, well, we can't get the MDO table in CMS to work properly. So that's why we said we can do that manually, get them their extra day off as soon as possible. So for reserves, we'll get the additional day off beginning in the month of February. If they get rolled into a day off and somehow the scheduler forgets to restore it, the system will not flag it that they need an additional day off, but it's a manual process. They'll be adjusted accordingly. So per diem, they initially said we're going to have to delay per diem until I think it was May. So we said, look, you can either like distribute rolls of nickels in the flight office, or I don't really care how you do it, or I'm really not good with technology, but it is not hard to add 55 cents an hour to time away from base. I don't know how they need to do it, but that's not hard. Well, what was it really? It was really that Canada is now going to be international. So we said, we're not going to have everybody not get their per diem increase because we fly to 4 cities in Canada. We'll figure out something for those 4 cities, but let's get everybody their money right away, that sort of thing. So that's what we're after, finding creative solutions to get the benefit into the pilots' pockets as soon as possible. Okay, so you see the package there, the information, you'll get that in the LOA. There's a nice table that will come at the back of the LOA that says when things are implemented. The structure of this is there'll be 2 company designees and 2 ALPA designees on the implementation team.
Bless you.
Yeah, bless you, Tom. So there will be oversight. One of the ALPA appointees has to have been directly involved in negotiations to make sure that they're aware of what was going on and what the intent behind the language was. And then the ALPA designees will absolutely be accountable to the MEC and to the master chair to make sure that this gets implemented properly. There are set penalties involved if the company misses a deadline. For example, in August, is it 5, 2, 1? No, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Sorry, it's a long week. Okay, so
Bigger roll.
okay, so in what do they say?
Another roll of nickels.
Oh, no. So for example, pilots on reserve before August will be entitled to 3 hours of ad pay, 2 hours of ad pay, or 1 hour of ad pay based on their availability for the month. So 1 day of reserve isn't going to get you the 3. If you have, there's a table we'll have in there. But in August, if they miss that, thank you. Okay. So if you have 13 to 18 reserve days prior to August, 3 hours of ad pay per bid period, 7 to 12, you get 2, 1 to 6, you get 1. You don't have to remember that breakdown. The important thing to remember is starting in August, if they miss that deadline, that doubles. Okay, things like the short call cap, if they, today, what we've negotiated is until they have a short call cap in place, that reserves who are assigned a short call above the cap will be entitled to 2 hours of ad pay for every short call assigned above that. So it's actually, we're trying to pull in things that will be implemented, that premium short call. Granted, they're not being asked if they want to pick up that extra short call above 6, but they will receive the payment for that. Those are the things that we tried to bring in early. And then that will apply after August if they miss the August implementation of the short call cap. If short call cap is not implemented by August, pilots will be entitled to 2 hours of ad pay for all short calls, whether they're picked up or assigned over the 6th. So if they miss it in August, starting in August, if you want to load up and start picking up short calls over 6, all those are going to pay 2 hours. So this gets very expensive very quick. That's millions of dollars a month. I don't feel bad about that. But the whole purpose of that is for them to see if they're looking at allocating more funds to bring in more programmers or more resources to get it done. They say, I don't know if we should do that. they know that they're expensing millions of dollars a month in additional reserve payments for which they generate no additional revenue. So it's a drain on them. It's a big problem for them. And then the untrained captain, accelerated captain upgrade training. Part of the negotiation of that product that we did back in July, we wanted to have an incentive. That's obviously the company, what they really want, what they gotta have. So quotes gotta have. I didn't say they gotta have it. So the whole purpose there, they've got to have that thing. So we said, okay, there's going to be 13 items that you have to have implemented before you can train that first accelerated pilot. What that also does is that promotes pressure from the network planning people, the people who run the airline versus the IT team to make sure that they have the funds and the horsepower to get the product out there for us, what we want, the reserve improvements. And because these are tied to those unfilled vacancies, meaning we believe if you implement these things, if you build it, they'll come. If quality of life increases around here, we've heard it from our pilots. The reason they're not upgrading is because reserve is terrible. They don't want to do these things under our current contract. So we have 13 items that are tied to that. I'll just run through them real quick. Oh, it's in your book. Okay.
Page 495.
495 is the items that have to be implemented before they can train the first accelerated captain.
495 on the black line.
Oh, black line.
And that's,
It's actually
that's part of the August.
I only have 450.
Yes, several of those are in August, but they can't. So there's two things going on here. If their unfilled captain problem goes away, if Boeing decides there's a problem in the MAX and we're not taking them, and so they don't have a need for as many captains. And so the company says, oh, it turns out we don't need to train those captains with less experience. We're going to slow roll the IT now. We don't have to move forward on that. That's why we have the significant financial penalties there that we catch them on that end of, no, you do need to do this because it's going to cost you an arm and a leg in the meantime. So it wasn't enough just to tie it to the thing that they want. You also got to get them on the finance side where they're just going to be paying out the nose to do something that they otherwise wouldn't have to do. Yeah.
You said that one about February.
The additional day off?
Yeah, but on there, February has 0.
It's tied. That item is still fully delivered. In May actually is when the MDO is supposed to be programmed. So that item will not be fully implemented until May, but the portion that they can implement, they have to implement as soon as possible. Much like per diem is not going to be an implemented item on their chart, their deliverable, they're not going to call per diem fully implemented until Canada is programmed properly. But for the majority of our pilots who aren't flying to Canada, per diem for all intents and purposes, they would say, oh, it's implemented. Does that make sense? So we don't call something implemented until all the list under that item is done. But if items 1 through 9 are done and item 10 is awaited, we don't call it complete. But for a lot of the pilots, they go, oh, I got my extra 55 cents. Correct. Yep. The other thing I'll say there is the additional day off. So there's 2 components for additional day off. We said, look, if you're not going to implement additional day off in October, if this deal ratifies, obviously we've already bid for October. In September, you'll have already bid for October by signing, closing. Absolutely, the new MPG is going to come into play. So while you will continue to have 18 days of work and 12 days off, October is 31-day month. So 18 days of work and 13 days off, you're not going to have a 73-hour guarantee. Your guarantee as a reserve will be 77, 13, 39. So you will be compensated for that additional day of work since you didn't get that as a day off. Marty, you okay with me answering questions? We're really close to being done. Thank you, Marty. Tell me your call sign because Dan wants to know. What? Pugs. Okay, I'll remember that. Go ahead. Microphone.
Thanks. Sorry about that. Just looking through here. So you're saying that there are no provisions of any of the changes to the reserve rules that will be implemented until they can implement all aspects of the reserve rule changes?
No, there's a number of reserve changes that will stagger in, but the big ones the long call only lines, voluntary early check, voluntary short call, compressed and short call caps all come in as a package because they're all interrelated.
So where, is there a listing of the things? that
Yes, it'll be very clear in the updated LOA that you'll get as part of the new black line document.
So to follow up that, based on what I'm seeing, sorry, as follows up on that, based on what I'm seeing up there and what I read as to, well, they need accelerated captains, they're not gonna get their first accelerated captain until somewhere third quarter 2024.
Yes, and if
Yeah,
they're hiring that captain today, they will likely have more than 350, not today. They're hiring that captain in October post ratification.
Yeah.
That, depending on where that pilot is based, they will likely have more than 350 hours. It will be a while likely until that plan as the minimum goes would come to fruition. We'll have Marty do the emceeing.
Andy, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
If we get asked by let's say a senior FO that wants to upgrade to captain, when will the reserve rules take over so my quality of life improves? So if they ask us next week, hey, when will this take place so I can use the right? I don't want to go to school and then have to work the old work rules until next August. What should we tell them?
So that's really an opinion. There's a lot of things that come into play. If they're a commuter versus a reserve, if you want to wait until the full thing rolls out, then it would be in August. You notice August is at the end of the summer, and you know how that goes around here. So if you want to wait until, pilots are typically conservative as well. If you want to wait until they roll out and you want to see how it actually works, you want to talk to people, hey, how's it going out there? Then there's your date. If you're concerned that you might not be able to hold it because everybody else, then you act accordingly. It's kind of a flexure there. And that's the difficult thing. Should I upgrade? Only that person can answer it. What we do know is the fact. So the additional day off will come in February. Additional MPG begins in October, and these additional rules come in August. But you don't know today if that pilot will be able to hold the long call only line or the voluntary early check line. There's a lot of variables there.
Maybe I can.
Yeah.
And I'll just add one thing, that the August date is the tallest pole in the tent. So I think we're gonna have to have some discussions with what used to be called IT, now it's called digital technologies. I'm gonna be very surprised if they're gonna flip the switch in August on all this stuff. My guess is that VEC lines might roll out earlier and they'll get comfortable with those. And then short call, as the milestones are met, our guess is that they'll begin rolling those things out. So hopefully the vacancy machine is still pumping. So for that pilot, I would tell him, just keep an eye on the prize. I mean, just see how things are going. If he's a VEC guy, he's a local and that is the program, then maybe he wants to see how that comes to fruition. But what is being driven right now is August is the line in the sand for all of the package to be delivered.
We've told them already the idea of doing this all the big bang. We did this back in, we were part of this in December of 2013 to January 2014. We called it Farmageddon around here because FAR 117 came out and a number of new UPA provisions came out, as well as a new trip trade system rolled out. And they rolled this all out in a span of 7 days. And we told them, this is a bad idea. It's a really bad idea. Because, well, I mean, IT is involved. And I mean, it's just a big change in everything. And they did it anyways, and it was a bad idea. So we are strongly advocating that roll this out in phases, roll it out, let the waters calm, make sure it works. If you want to do it in August, okay, that's still summer. Yeah. I don't have any cruises planned in August, so. All right.
Andy, you guys got a lot of digital products going out to
Yeah.
the pilots. Are you gonna be putting out a color-coded UPA like we did
Yeah.
the last time with the implementation table?
Yes, yeah, very helpful. A lot of communication, advising pilots what's changed, how they can access. Somebody asked about, how do you reach out if you need that surgery or medical procedure? We're going to cover all that. Still, the best resource is going to be the PDR system to the respective committee. That's where the SMEs will be and can answer your specific question. But absolutely, Tim, the rollout of this is critical. Communicating to the pilots when something has been turned on and how it works, and then how to give feedback if something isn't working properly. Yep.
With respect to the accelerated captains,
Yes.
did I hear you correctly that they can't use them until the earliest August, but they can start dropping them earlier. So they'll build up that 350 hours
Yeah.
you're just saying?
Yeah, they can drop them, but remember, there's a timeline there. If they don't send them to training, that they can get released from that obligation. So there's a number of things that are, it's a long fuse that's been lit. And if they don't deliver, they run a lot of risk there.
Specific to implementation, just real quick, couple, and then, because I know section 20, we haven't had questions on, we want to definitely spend some time on that, and they still got a few more slides to go. So implementation.
So with the implementation of retro, when does that happen? And is that for,
Yeah, so we've got a slide on retro. Yeah, we'll cover all that. November 1, 12/1, 2026. I'm just kidding.
Tuesday of next week.
Is this a bare?
Yeah.
Is this a bare bones minimum timeline? Could the company choose to take 6 of the 7 December items and move them forward if they were to get their act together?
Yeah.
It's just punitive only if they don't meet the deadline?
Yeah, Philip, so there's in the preamble to this LOA, there's language that says that the company will not unduly delay an item that's ready to be moved out the door. Also, it says if there's something that can be a process that can be handled manually, they shall not delay it to automate it. They can do it manually. So behind the scenes, there are going to be a lot of manual processes that occur between now and December to make sure that the pilots are paid properly for something. For example, if the company said, hey, we're going to implement field standby pay in January or February, that's unacceptable to us. If a pilot is sitting field standby after date of signing on this agreement, they need to be compensated for that at a minimum until involuntary field standby goes away. They don't have a code in the system that they could turn on October 1st that says field standby equals 3 hours of ad pay. But they do have the ability in post pay, because we all know we're not paid the next day. All the work that you do in the October bid period, the first 6 days of the next bid period is what's called pay close. That's when they run everything, audit everything, make sure you're paid properly. That's their opportunity to true people up and make sure that they're compensated. If they are unable to get that done in that short period of time, because a lot of processes are coming, if they have to pay the pilot in November for that, well, November would be when you get paid for October post pay. If they got to pay the pilot in December for that 1 month, that's more acceptable than delaying it until January, meaning not being paid at all until January. Those are the things that we attack. We understand that it's the same number of resources in some departments today as there will be tomorrow, but it's their job to manage this. They agreed to this contract at the table, and we expect it to be implemented as soon as possible. So that's what we went after there. Yeah. Ratification bonus. Here's your ratification bonus.
All right. Morning. So yesterday we talked about what you're gonna get paid forward. This is the money you're owed for this long duration of having to wait. Okay. So you've seen these percentages before. We put them out for, but basically this lines up with exactly kind of how Delta did it and American. So everyone's basically at the end of the day is getting about the same percentages. The way it's going to actually be handled is you're going to get, and it's in the, you'll see it in the LOA, is there's going to be actually 2 paychecks, 2 chunks of this. It's going to, the reason being is for the year, for this year, for 2023, that amount is actually going to get retirement contributions on top for it. And it's also going to qualify it as eligible earnings for profit sharing. The amounts for 20 through 22 don't. So in order for accounting purposes, it's going to be paid separately. So your first check that it has to be before November 1st will cover all the retro you're due from 2020, 21, and 22. And then they have 30 days after that to cut the second check, which will be for all your amount for 23 that you are. And part of that reason is too, is we have to wait for pay close for September to occur, run all the processes. And then we've got a team of experts that are going to validate and make sure everyone's paid what they're owed. So.
Did you say, and I'm gonna miss it, the date of the first?
Yeah, the first check is the LOA says no later than or on November 1st. And then the second one is on or no later than or on December 1st. And it might, and I think those are generous because I think they're targeting doing it before that.
Okay, website again.
Don't know yet. The part of the issue with that, Julian, is again, because we won't know what you're owed for September until pay close. So it's going to be, so we have to figure out how we're going to do with that. So looking at comm guys are what for the latest. So yeah. Right. For right now, we'll try to get you some information on how to guide pilots on how they can, what you can use to estimate. But right off the bat, just for your information, don't take this as gospel, but I think the best thing to do is you go and pull up your last paycheck of each of those years and look at your flight pay. That's basically roughly about the number you're gonna figure out that your eligible earnings were for the year. No, because well, none of that, because box 5 includes imputed income and other things in there. It kind of skews it. So best is, again, go to your last paycheck for each of the years and look at your flight pay line, and that will get you ballparkish where you're at. Best reserve. Oh, that's you.
Exciting. LOA 2303, the company was very resident to allow us to even entertain this idea. And I probably was the one carrying most of this water. So hopefully you will see some value in this. Otherwise, all the people behind me will be correct. So Guam has had compressed reserves for quite some time. It's a very successful program out there. It's not just for commuters. In fact, I think we mostly see local guys bidding compressed lines. So what the company has agreed is to evaluate these for global categories initially. So we will create this LOA will create a test bed for specific categories to roll this out. The company's concern is guys are going to bunch up all the reserve days and they're going to get fatigued, and they had a whole list of reasons why this will never work, but we were finally able to get them across the finish line to at least take a look at these. So compressed line rules, a reserve will be able to bid either a block of days off or a block of work as a single series of events. The company will be allowed to preset some 30-hour breaks. That's their biggest complaint, is that they look at 18 days of work and they go, hey, we know FAR 117 requires us to give you 30-hour breaks every 168 hours. That reserve is going to get 2 additional days off in there. So what we've allowed them to do is to pre-assign short calls. So if you finished a trip, they can give you a short call 30 hours later. If they do that, then you remove your pre-assigned 30-hour break. These pilots won't have a short call cap, and they're not eligible to be long call only or VEC. So you are basically a traditional reserve with all your reserve days in one group and all your days off in one group. If the test is successful, we get the feedback we get from the pilots is, yes, this is something we want. This is something we'd like to see. And the company also agrees that there's no unintended harm, then we will roll that out to basic categories. If the basic test is successful, then we will make compressed lines part of the book, and it will be an option available for us through PBS bidding, just as the Guam pilots do. Do we want to roll through all these and then? Okay. 2304. Oh. We want Bob to speak to this?
You can answer questions.
Okay. Enhanced reserve pool display. This is, we're all familiar with pool. It's a terrible tool. I can't emphasize how bad it is. And unfortunately, it's what they set their metrics for trip trading on. Bad day, worst day was intended to band-aid that problem. The overarching theme, and I'll try to simplify this, and Bob will clean up my mess here in a couple of minutes if you have questions. But the current system on September 2nd, it doesn't know if it knows there's 30 pilots available on reserve. What it doesn't know is are those 30 one-day pilots? Are those 30 pilots good for 2 days, 3 days? So inherently, so the holes in the Swiss cheese don't line up, they inflate the numbers. So they just say, hey, I know I have 30 guys. If I make the min 50, then statistically, there's probably enough different types of reserve availability in there to cover what I need. So what we are pushing forward is an enhanced reserve pool display. There's an example in the book of what we envision, which is going to look very similar to what used to be in Unimatic, which is how many one-day pilots do I have? How many two-day pilots do I have? How many three-day pilots do I have? How many four-day pilots? So we can start using our reserve metrics with a scalpel instead of a blunt force trauma device. We will have, or the SSC will have input into these staffing parameters and functionality, and then we will work to ensure that bad day, worst day works against that. So if we don't have an implementation on this by the first day of October 2024, and we'll get another set of GDOs going forward. Let me just keep rolling. What is it? Electronic notification. Sure. Why not? All right. Voluntary pilot electronic notification. So the meltdown in July has certainly exposed numerous weaknesses to our communication structure at this airline. We had a lot of feedback from pilots asking for new ways or different ways that they can get in touch with the company, or the company can get in touch with them. Many of us use Crew Companion, which has fantastic notifications abilities, ways to communicate amongst each other. So this is a voluntary program. It allows for electronic messaging between pilots and the company. The pilots will be able to initiate messaging to the company, and then any communication that require the pilot to conform, to confirm, acknowledge, will include some sort of receipt acknowledgement. And then if the pilot does not confirm, the pilot must revert, the company must revert back to current methods of acknowledgement, which is two-way contact, pick the phone up. So what some of our peers are starting to use is more of a chat feature, or the company has shown us some ideas they have, which is they'll text message you a card of your assignment, and you press acknowledge on your screen, and then your trip's acknowledged. All the stuff is handled in the background. There's no longer pick up the phone to sit on hold for a couple hours to let them know that you're just trying to acknowledge an assignment so you can go to bed. So that will be coming forth in LOA 2305.